Hey guys, today I'm bringing you a video that is somewhat special in some way, because it's sort of like a sub-replay review kind of thing. This is a tank that I don't generally intend to drive myself because I'm not a fan of derp guns, and basically that's the only way to really drive this tank. But because I recently got sent 2 epic loss replays in this tank and an epic win replay in this tank, I figured I could use them to make a bit of a review of it, because for a lot of people this tank is a lot of fun. It's just my own idea that I don't like derp guns that makes me not drive it. And this battle on its own I think is lost very quickly. Not necessarily because Bob is doing bad, he will do epic, but if you look at the time that he spends in the same spot, hoping to be effective from there, but not having a chance to be effective at all, it wastes a lot of time and it wastes a lot of damage that he could have done, which would have helped his team, which would have helped his team win, basically. Even with the epic long reload that his tank has, he should have already been able to get more shots in. He is carrying a lot of HE and very little heat, which makes sense because this tank is all about the HE, but in my opinion it's always tricky because you never know if you can pen people with HE. But then you see, when people let him aim and he can actually shoot, he does score beautifully and he gets his first kill. And he takes care to not be in anyone's side when he's actually reloading, because that would make him basically a very unnecessary risk. But now he is reloaded and he shoots HE at the roof, well, the back roof of the tank, and that's why I both love and hate HE. If you can pen people, it's great, but if you can't, it's such a big weakness. And that is exactly why I'm not a fan of derp tanks, because now he has a high roll and I think that's more crew skill than anything else. But it's still very tricky and I has to wait until it reloads again. But the guy below doesn't really have a clue. The guy up there is a very juicy target, but he pulls out before Bob can actually shoot him. So he turns back to this guy and he finishes him off. And that is what HE is good for in this case, because it is a big gun, so he can kill off relatively high HP targets with it. And that's always the tricky part of HE, you have to really think about it, and you can get either really lucky or really unlucky, because with this gun doing only 300 damage can be considered quite unlucky. And because of the long reload in this tank, you can't really afford to not be effective with it. And he waits for them because they will peek out to try and kill his teammates, but he has not a very low roll in this tank, and then he has to pull back more because he has to reload again. And he's repositioning. This is something Bob is generally, he's a really epic player, so you can trust me when I tell you that he knows what he's doing. But it is very unlucky that he's now with 2 versus 3, and it's gonna be 1 versus 3 now. And he's at a disadvantage here because he only has HE to really be effective, and when he's fired it means that he's basically useless for, well, 15 seconds, which is a very long time. And considering he has next to no armor, it's actually really good that he relocated himself, and he's positioning himself that he can shoot anyone that comes towards him. Now he knows that there's at least one in the base, but that he can run off quite quickly as well. So he's now trying to find a position where he can have a view in the base and hopefully see who is there so that he can shoot them. And he's repositioning himself again, mostly to be able to react very quickly. And this is what I love about Bob. He takes his time, he knows that he doesn't have to reset the base straight away, and when he shoots the guy, he's lucky that he doesn't get spotted, which means that he can reload in safety and get another shot in. But that is unfortunately an extremely low roll, which doesn't help his case. But having fired 2 shots from the same position, even a potato should know where Bob is now. So he relocates, and that's a really good move, because he's moving into a position where he can get another shot in and hopefully kill this guy off so that he only has 2 more enemies to contend himself with. But that last shot does get him spotted and he needs to move himself quickly and get unspotted again. He still has some time before he needs to reset the base, but he only knows where one guy is and there's 2 enemies left, so every move that he makes now is quite tricky, because again, no armor, long reload and everything, so he has to make sure that every shot he takes counts. And as he approaches the base and is spotted again, he knows he only has around 10 seconds to actually do damage, so he has to make sure that this shot connects. And that means taking a huge risk and taking a shot or two, getting down, shooting the guy, and then running off to basically take cover again, because even if they can still technically keep together, he basically just needs to get out of shot until he reloads and gets another shot in. But he's taking a lot of damage. He doesn't kill the guy off, and it's basically his death sentence. And that's basically where having a gun that depends on HE is a thing that I really dislike. I'd rather have a good gun with proper premo and everything that will make me be a lot more effective. Now, Bob is nearly dead. He misses his shot and basically he's doomed himself with that. And the only thing he can do is run, but then the other enemy is there and he gets killed. And this so would have been his game if he had a few more high rolls and if he had been able to HE them properly, basically. And this is in the hands of a very good player. So imagine me trying to drive this, or people that have less experience in the game. It's a very tricky tank. Now, the second game that we have is also an epic loss, and this time the tank is driven by Ethan, the penguinkiller. Now, he starts by going up the hill in mines, which is generally what you do here. Has a low roll but tracks him, but no one else shoots the guy, so that doesn't really help. Shots are flying left and right, but no damage is done. And it's just basically a typical mines battle. And with the position that Ethan is in, he needs to be careful, because it's very easy to get pushed into the line of fire by your own teammates there. And it's very easy to get shot to hell by the enemies there, because this side is generally weaker going up the hill than the other side, in my opinion. But as he continues, he is looking around to make sure that that doesn't happen and that he's not getting snuck up on. He does take a little bit of damage, but he keeps his tank pretty secure against the wall there, and he gets some nice shot of damage there. And that's the thing, when you do pen with this tank, the damage you do is amazing. But his team is generally pulling back towards the base, and that means that Ethan is pretty much alone there. And he's making a very good call of just following them, because even though he could have probably held the hill, it's really not worth the risk in a lightly armored tank as this is. And with this way he can help his team and hopefully not be primary target, so do damage and help his team. And this is one mistake that he makes, because he makes the shot even though it's an E75, and even though briefly before he saw that the armor profile was still red despite seeing the flank at a little bit of an angle. So he has to be very careful. He really can't pen the thing at all, and the E75 really isn't bothered by him. But then he does pen it in the side and he finally kills the guy off, and he only has a few heat shells left, which I still think is big of a risk. But then I'm all for spamming Premo if it can help you be a little more effective. So now he ignores the T95 that has spotted him, and he continues onwards towards the rest of his team to help them. And this is always a good call, because even if they have no clue what to do whatsoever, the longer you keep them alive, the more chances are that you will stay alive yourself and that you'll be able to win the battle, basically. So his teammates are steadily dying. He's driving around here. I'm not a fan of the position that he's in, mostly because there's little cover to move from the position that he's in, and that's very tricky. Now he does have a very nice possible HE shot there, does a ton of damage, but he does zoom out before he actually fires, and that's always a risk. And I honestly think, despite the epic shot that he just had, that going here is eventually what cost him the game. He's spending a lot of time here and he's not being effective where he is, and that's the tricky part, because now there's only one guy left and he's in the middle of a lot of enemy fire. Ethan can't get a shot in where he is, and he's waiting for this guy to peek out, but he's not being stupid, so he's not peeking out, so Ethan can't get the kill. And again, I feel that Ethan should have moved on and gone elsewhere in order to be effective, possibly save his teammate, but he probably wouldn't have been able to do that. But now he's in a very tricky position. He can't shoot the guy going into the hill, and he is spotted for you. He fires a shot, and that won't help either, because he's now stuck in one position and waiting to reload, having 3 enemies against him, one of which is very slow, but 2 of which really aren't, and a Borsi can HE a T49 very much. But Ethan gets a shot in first. He does take a shot from the CDC, but the CDC isn't the bigger problem here. It's the Borsig. But he's taking shots more and more now, so he has to be very careful. He kills the Borsig, has to make sure to be away from him a little bit so that he doesn't kill himself with HE. But he is using his position and his cover very effectively, which keeps them from killing him basically. And now he just has to wait until he sees what's happened, and this guy is going completely YOLO to try and kill him off. But Ethan is waiting for him, has a lot of crew skills activated, and that means that he got to kill, and now he's just him versus T95, which is really slow. So if Ethan can get behind him, the guy is absolutely toast. But it's very tricky because even a badly aimed HE shot will kill Ethan now. And now Ethan is in a very tricky position because he needs to be very careful, and at the same time he's a little scared. Of course, nerves are going through his body. It's a Kolobanov situation and everything, and he needs to decide what he's gonna do. But he doesn't have anyone else to do the spotting for him, which doesn't help matters. And basically he's like just at a loss at what to do right now. Because as he says in the chat, he knows that the T95 is there somewhere, but he doesn't know which way the gun is pointing. And if he peeks out in the wrong direction, he's basically toast. But then Ethan thinks about it a little bit longer, turns his tank around and decides to take a risk. But I think it's the wrong risk to take, because the other side would have had a lot more cover and a lot more little dips that could have made a guy miss a shot. But because he's still making momentum and then gaining speed, he gets shot and he gets killed, and that's the end of the battle. And even though he loses this battle, this is again a game that shows all the strengths and weaknesses of this tank. Both players that we've seen so far have made really good calls, and calls that could have been better. And this is not a game by penguinkiller, and this is a game where it works out basically. He flanks around to the enemy mat spawn, and that means that he gets a nice target on the flank. He takes a little bit of time to aim, but not too much. Shoots, and does a nice damage shot there. Now, that shot having connected, he veers off to the left, basically to avoid getting rushed by the guy that he just shot, and casually makes his way to his teammate to see if he can help him. And even though by then not much has really happened yet, they're already cussing, which doesn't really help matters. And this is a very clever move from Ethan. This is the part where I mean with not being the primary target. He waits for the other guy to push in first, and then he pushes in, takes a moment to aim, shoots, does massive damage, and then just basically stays behind him. His teammate kills off the guy, and that means that Ethan can line up for another high damage shot. He doesn't go into sniper mode for it, which I think is a big risk. But he has some luck there, does massive damage and sets the guy on fire even though he fixes, and he gets away with it without even taking a single shot of damage himself. He doesn't get this kill either because his teammate kills the guy off before he can, but that doesn't really matter, I think, because, well, basically like with the Death Star, you want to make the big shots, you don't want to make the little shots. But in this case he would have had plenty of time to reload again. And with the enemy still visible, Ethan takes a little bit of time, reconsiders, pulls back a little bit to see what he can do from there. He switches ammo to see which tank he can hit best, switches back to HE, does a little bit of damage, but he has the time to reload before they even notice that he's really there. So he can just stay there a little bit, decides to go into town, but not quite yet. And I think that's a good call as well, because he has the reload that he has to wait for, and he doesn't have the armor to absorb all the hits. But he has another teammate that basically will be the first target. So if he can get some shots in from where he is now, that would actually be amazing. But he hastily takes the shot without having aimed fully, so he misses, which doesn't help his case, because now he only has one friend left, which doesn't seem to be able to do much. And it's just himself with 3 other people that he needs to kill basically. The people in the chat really aren't helping, and I can only say, if you don't have anything constructive to say that will help the battle, don't say anything at all, because it doesn't help, it breaks people's concentration, and it only means that you're ruining the game for them as well as for yourself. And I think Ethan going back this way is really clever, especially with the position of his teammate, because likely he will be the first target, and Ethan will be able to get some shots in, even though that does very little damage. He pulls back immediately to keep himself from being shot at, but he uses this cover superbly, and I love that his teammate, despite being a potato, is getting some damage and some kills in, and is giving Ethan the opportunity to basically stay hidden and keep his HP while they finish the guy off steadily. But now he has to move in, because otherwise they're gonna get flanked by the guy in the desert. He zooms around this guy, which doesn't even pay attention to him, which means that he can land a nice shot on the behind, stay behind him, and even though the ram does him some damage, the guy isn't really paying attention to him at all, and that's a backhaul on his side, because if you have the choice of a sort of armor tank and a very juicy tank, always go for the very juicy tank, because that will be easier to kill. And this whole game, Ethan has showcased exactly how you can be effective and where you need to be without being the primary target. This guy is only now starting to pay attention to Ethan, and he's already gotten a shot into him. This teammate is getting a shot into him, because now he's turning his flank towards the other teammate, and Ethan now has basically all the time in the world to aim carefully, do damage, because he has the HP, he has the teammate, and he gets the kill. And I'm really happy for Ethan that this happened, because this was the first ace that he got in this tank, and he had been trying so hard to get it, and it was just such a beautiful game. I'm glad that I got to use his replays and Bob's replays, and I hope that my explanation of everything will help people along further, and I'll be seeing you guys the next time again.